Is it better to be in step or out of step? Hey, my friend, this will probably be a bit of a different video for the channel, as it was actually inspired by events in early 2023. And while I've been reducing the amount of news I actually consume, I'm still aware of certain things that go on. And besides, sometimes the best stories and examples to draw from are in real life. So why not make use of them? And also, because 15 votes to determine Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives is not business as usual, especially if we looked at what the Senate did in the same time period. And since that is probably the only thing that is not debatable about that whole situation, I'm probably going to leave it at that for the most part, because how we feel about what happened or anyone who was involved doesn't really matter in a way because it did happen. And I think there are actually some principles or at least trends that were in play there that we should be aware of so that we can make use of them or be aware of them in a sense, depending on how we find ourselves in relation to them. Anyway, so let's get back to being in step or out of step. There is this thing about humans is that we are pretty much made for community, and we see this throughout history. People have always tried to gather in these two tribes, villages, cities, and nations. If anything, it was possibly just for survival, because having this bitter group to hunt bitter prey with, or to gather more items for winter, or to build sturdier dwellings, or even just to plant these bitter fields is a major advantage. I mean, safety in numbers after all. There's a reason for the saying. And this is where being in step comes in. Because with these tribal structures, and it goes up that chain up to the nations and so forth, in that there also is this identity that comes with being a part of it. As in, like, people would identify themselves as being part of the tribe. They have this identity, this shared identity, this similar values in a sense, and it makes it easier to declare them us in a sense. Yet when someone would clash with that identity, it becomes that much easier to declare them other, whether because they have different abilities or different likings or whatever. It just becomes easier to say, oh, you're not like us, or you're not like me in a sense, would be a better way of putting it, because people tend to view themselves as almost this monolithic rather than just a group of individuals in a sense. It becomes more of a thing of a group of us, or a hive almost, in some cases. But so being labeled as this other would tend to lead to someone getting thrown out of the tribe, or even worse. And to be honest, that labeling of someone other is probably the major causes, or at least one of them, for most of fighting throughout all of history. Because then it's kind of like when someone is not us, then should we treat them as we would treat us, rather than if we see people as, oh, we're all human, so we should treat each other as human. But then if someone is then not, you kind of get what I'm saying there, is that it's kind of easy to go down this very dark hole in a sense, where someone doesn't have as much value just because they aren't part of the tribe, or they aren't part of our group, or whatever. And so, in a sense, we kind of have this preference to try and fit in the group, even if it means conforming to certain things we may not feel comfortable with. Because not only do we find safety there, there is also power when we get into that group. And for example, just think of this phalanx, which was the greatest military formation of its time. And it was made of soldiers who would move in step with one another, locking their shields to become almost this unbreakable wall. And we tend to view groups in much the same way, as these unstoppable monoliths that will bear down on us if we trust them even slightly. Yet, the thing about the phalanx is that nowadays a well-timed use of a cannon or something would disrupt a phalanx entirely, thus making where a legion of soldiers could basically be stopped by a small group or even just one person. In addition, the flants only worked because they were in sync. If they were off by a little bit, then the weaknesses to be acted upon more easily. There are better depths between the shield for arrows, or even just swords to get in and start working through people. And so these two things actually demonstrate why people tend to get so upset about people who either purposely did out of step with them or even just unintentionally did out of step with them. Because it's first a threat to their safety and also power, and people really like power in a sense, because now it's not as strong as it used to be, or what they counted on may not be the case. For example, someone may have already moved into their new office only to find out that they actually still have to win over some deciding votes to find out if they actually did the position. And this is where the other part comes into play, is that someone outside the group may not always be beholden to that group, but they may actually have something the group needs or wants. And it's kind of like a hermit in a way, but the hermit is actually the Fisher team. They may live in the mountain and be self-sufficient among all things, but the village down below actually needs the hermit to be happy and healthy and so forth, and have all that they need so that their kind of place stays nice and beautiful and plentiful for them. Kind of a fantastical example, but it's kind of just a way of demonstrating it that sometimes it may be a very inconvenient thing to embrace. And because in that case, the outsider is actually the one with the leverage. They get to dictate at least some of the terms of how the negotiations will go or what they may get out of it. And so I guess in summary to this, the answer to the question of if it's better to be in step or out of step is that it depends on the situation. Because if we have any solid doors or foundation at all, we are going to find ourselves both in and outside of groups at different times in our lives. And knowing what that means for us in any given situation probably comes down to both wisdom and experience of ourselves and of others. Yet, in conclusion, I want to leave you with this interesting history fact I read recently, with kind of the final thing about groups, in that the ancient Greeks actually had this concept in government called the ecclesia, where if the government was considered corrupt, the people could basically give it a vote of no confidence by leaving the city for a little bit and supporting the ecclesia. And if enough people agreed with that ecclesia, then the ruling government would collapse and the officials would have to be replaced and so forth. And so even if you may feel like you're going to have to break with a group, or even if you're on your own right now, you could just be in the process of starting your own. Anyway, I hope you found value in this video. Please like and subscribe if you did to support the growth of this channel. And feel free to share your comments about this topic in the comments below. And so, I'm Jonah. You've been watching Lionsmane Media. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.